Hello, welcome to Dynasty Degens, episode 29. I am joined as always with Nino Brown. Nino, how you doing, man? What's going on?
I'm good. I'm excited to get to talk. I think it's gonna be a special episode, and I'm excited to get in. I missed last week talking about my guy Will Levis. I think I'm like the second most, in love with Will Levis besides Cody, and I missed it. That was my opportunity, and I dropped the ball.
Yeah, Cody was asking about you. He felt cornered because we had two guys that aren't so high on Will Levis, and then we needed you to kind of back him up a little bit. But
I would have had
that was a good show.
Yeah,
yeah,
it was a very good show.
Yeah, we're going to be talking crypto fantasy assets today. We're talking about players that you probably had locked in, and you said this is going to be like my Dogecoin, and it's suddenly worth negative money, and you don't know what to do with it. And hopefully we can maybe tell you to hold it or to just get out of there. And we're going to just talk about a little bit of everything in between there. But first, I do want to introduce our special guest tonight, somebody that's a great mind in the space. He's all over the place. He's doing, I believe he is the senior writer at DLF. He does podcasts with Russ and all those guys every Wednesday. This is Peter Howard. Peter, how you doing tonight, man? What's going
on,
brother?
I forgot I wasn't muted. I was just sitting back here chuckling. I didn't mean to sound like I wasn't taking it serious. Yeah, it's just, you said great mind, and I don't think that's ever been applied to me in any context other than right then, and it made me laugh.
I think your
that's
mind
not true.
is,
I play fantasy football for fun.
It's very
that's
good.
Definitely not a great mind working here. Just efficiency wise, like what should I spend all my free time doing? Fantasy football stats. Definitely not a great mind. Just saying. But no, I'm really happy to be here and talk to you all.
I think it's all relative. I think, for us, that's a great mind. Maybe for other people, that's not such a great mind.
It's a beautiful mind.
For here, that's exactly the kind of mind we're looking for.
Another descriptive word that's never been applied to me. Beautiful. No. But yeah. I do spend an enormous amount of time thinking about fantasy football. I can put it that way. What's new with you guys?
Wait, I was going to ask you, how did this start, man? Like, how did you just start? Were you like you just were born and you were thinking about fantasy football? Like, how did
pretty much? I came out with an Excel sheet. I'd written it out. Inside the womb.
What really got you started?
I guess the same as everywhere. Well, from my generation, like a lot of people grew up like playing it, but I come from England, so like I didn't even know what this sport was. But I had another hobby, and they started a fantasy football redraft league, and they needed a 12th man basically. And I was like, sure, I guess. I don't know what that is, and also I don't understand that sport. But looking for friends in a new country, you're trying to make connections. I was trying to learn the sports in my new native land, as it were. So I said yes. And like everyone else in fantasy football, I am overly competitive to the point of being a juvenile, and I didn't like not being good at it. But where I didn't grow up watching this sport particularly. I literally didn't know what was good. Like someone would get 100 receiving yards. I was like, is that good? Like, what's the average? Is 100 good or is 50 good? Like, I don't know, literally to that level. And so the easiest way for me to catch up quickly was just to start looking basically at the past. What is a good amount of receiving yards in a single game, and how do they translate to fantasy points? So I immediately started collecting what I now have since learned is called data. At the time, I was just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Like literally first week, I asked my friend who asked me to join the league, like, look at my lineup. Is this right? And he was like, well, you do have 2 Hall of Famers sitting on your bench. I would fix that. I was like, okay, that's good to know. Hall of Famers good. Add that column. But that's how it started. I sucked, but I kind of enjoyed it. It's a fun, like everyone else that plays, it's a fun game. You get to enjoy a sport, and also you have a rooting interest, and you get to root for these players from another perspective. And something about the stats rolling in and collecting on your team over someone else's and a way to beat someone. Overly competitive also feeds into that. So that's literally how it started. I just sucked that first year, really. But like the competition, I wanted to get better at it. And I did end up, getting to know those guys a little better and having fun. That league's long since gone, but that was like 50 leagues ago now. So, whatever. I've met a whole lot of other people with the same interests like you do. And so it's always just pull me in like that. Like I enjoy the game, but getting to talk to people, getting to know people, getting to see how they think and reason. And also, surprisingly, the stupid levels of detail that we end up going into with fantasy football, there is a whole point of how do you try to predict the future when you know the future is literally unpredictable? We're not Nostradamus. We don't think we know what the future holds. So what do you do in a game that's literally predicated on trying to guess what the future is in that situation? And trying to reason that out has been fun for me, I guess, in a very nerdy, pathetic kind of a way.
Yeah, because you're big into analytics, and that's why I love having you on. I always look at your content. I'm always following that up. I know you say you don't have a beautiful mind, but I think I could argue. I can make a really good argument against that because I am a tape guy through and through. I grind tape. I watch tape. I watch like prospect tape. I'll go through it and I break it down. I hit the space bar, all that good stuff. But I don't always have time for both. So I look for people that I trust, and maybe you could dive in before we get into the whole topic of the show. Like, what's your process like? What are you going through when you're looking at, say, a guy coming out, maybe coming for the draft? Like, what do you look at?
All right, got to clear 3 hours because at this point it's so convoluted. No, common misconception. I don't think of myself as an analytics guy. Mainly, well, for a start, talking about A Beautiful Mind. What looks more like the scene in A Beautiful Mind where he's staring there and the numbers are dancing around on the screen and he's coming up with all these genius ideas because of what he's watching. Some guy watching the tape and slowly analyzing frame by frame, or a guy like me going, that number bigger than another number. Like, I personally think the tape guys might be more akin to the Beautiful Mind scene of, deep in the weeds, I can see things no one else can see. I really don't think I can do that, especially on a sport I never played, and I will never, because I enjoy the amount of pain I have at this age is quite considerable, and I don't want to add to it, so I'm probably never going to get on a football field of any sort, of this type of football. And I especially because of the way I came into it, I knew I wasn't going to catch up on having watched football my entire life. Well, let me go about this another way. Having watched soccer, what you call soccer, my entire life, like I knew the history and I know the old names and I can regale, get involved in the conversation about who was the greatest of all time striker or defender or midfielder. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to replace that very quickly and trying to catch up with everyone else in the league. But I could collect a whole bunch of information about who scores what kind of points and maybe what they have in common. And so for me, that's why I was number orientated rather than tape orientated. I didn't understand the game. I didn't know the rules. Watching the tapes, still watching the tape, I don't, like, they all look highly impressive to me. Like Sky Moore's out there sucking like I predicted, and yet he looked phenomenally athletic. Like, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's amazing at this game. And I have trouble distinguishing between that and Brandon Ayuk or Justin Jefferson. I just know one scores more points than another. I don't think I'm going to beat or find an edge there. Whereas just collecting information about basically the past, and that's what I said, it was a common misconception. I'm using spreadsheets and numbers, but I'm not doing the math, man. The computer does that. Like, I can't do math. Are you kidding me? I hit enter and it does the math. And I also don't, I have tried to learn about modeling and R squared, and I learned about all these mathematical concepts basically to keep up with what's being explained to me by the beautiful minds that are good at that, have PhDs and they do statistical analysis. And I want to know where they're bullshitting me and where they're not. And since this is my hobby, I get to pretend I can do that. And so I try to learn what they're trying to explain. But essentially what my process is a historical one. It's not really an analytic one. I'm looking at past players, what they did and what preceded what they did, if you know what I mean. Like, what did they do the week before they broke out or the year before they broke out? What did they do in college before they became Justin Jefferson? Or what did they do in college before they became David Montgomery for that matter, and then seeing players that compare well to that. So it's really a historical comparison. I see it as a historical process more than an analytics one, because I'm not trying to create new numbers. Like if I add this number to this number and then put it through a machine learning system, because I still don't understand those, then I can predict who is Brandon Ayuk and who's Sky Moore. And instead, what I do is I look at players and I try to find out who is more similar to who on the most common and the best tested metrics. Like yards per team attempt in college is pretty strong at every position. So as points per game, especially if you're looking at running back, seems weird that we just happen to have a fantasy point system that correlates to what we want. But statistically, it turns out it makes sense. A stat is always going to be more predictive of itself than anything else. So points per game actually tends to be a relatively strong stat, since what we're actually chasing, and we sometimes get lost in the weeds this way, we're playing fantasy, we're chasing points. And so points actually test to be one of the best indicators, even though it's not mega-brained or sophisticated. Just look at points per game over a certain game threshold, especially, and it's pretty much as indicative as any single stat. Yards per route run doesn't beat it at anything, and certainly not at predicting the future or who's going to score more points. And even most models struggle to compete just with points per game. And so the fun thing for me, you, and Dupree, and anyone else who isn't a mega genius, is we can get at least 98% of the signal without having to be a genius, just by understanding some of the basics and then just looking at the history. And history I'm fairly comfortable with, because that's, kind of what I studied before, I became an adult and life became less fun. So that makes sense to me. Just what happened before, what preceded what happened before, and what are the percentages? Like how many times does this work out or not work out? And that seems to at least keep me up, helps me keep up with the people that I'm playing with, which is what I need, because even the best basically beat the average about, like the best fantasy players will be more right. Like they get things right 53% of the time. It's not 70%. It's not 80%. Evan Silver isn't out here batting 98%. 53%, and you're one of the elite members in terms of guessing what's going to happen in the future. Now, I'm not an elite member, but if I can just get slightly above average, then over time, technically I win. And, just simple stuff like that seems to get me there, or get us close enough that I can win some leagues and have some fun and call other people idiots for not winning this particular year. He left. I talked too long, obviously. But to keep talking, because he's gone, my rookie process, I detail it on YouTube at this point, but it basically starts out with the same thing. It's a historical comparison. I have certain stats that I prefer to compare players on, and I retest those every year. So there is some analytics involved in that, understanding what stat does well for what. But mostly it's comparing how players performed on the best stat that I can find for any particular position relative to the context in which they were playing. Unfortunately, team and conference adjustments don't seem to help us out much, but you can take that context into account. So when you see a player consistently coming from a team that produces higher numbers but no hits, you can just know that those numbers are exaggerated. But applying a broad adjustment doesn't work. So yards per team attempt is my common one for wide receivers, like I said. So I'll look at that relative to a player's ADOT and yards per route run, which we now have for college, and I managed to insert in my public database. So we can look at what you would expect a good player to do from that particular situation with their amount of volume and how well they actually compare to that number. And that's essentially my rookie process. With wide receivers, it's yards per team attempt. With running backs, it's a little more scattershot. And points per game, like I say, can weigh into it. But yards per team attempt, including both the rushing and the receiving game, tends to help out. Obviously, you don't have ADA and yards per route run for those guys, but looking at how involved they are in the receiving game seems to have an important signal, because, what's Zach Reed's stat? Like Derrick Henry had the 5th overall best rushing season ever last year, and he was still 40 points behind Alvin Kamara, who just had a mediocre year, which was always my favorite way of highlighting why receiving is important for running backs. It's not because you have to be a receiver. It's because it adds this just incredible floor for the overall points. Tight ends, I do much like receivers. Quarterbacks, I just avoid. I think quarterbacks is basically mystery magic. I'm going to wait to see who's good.
Shooting fish.
Although there is accuracy versus experience, seem to be the best two elements to a quarterback's rookie profile. But again, like I say, I actually got CJ Stroud pretty right this year. But I tend to leave ranks at quarterback down to ADP. I haven't done this for a while. Quarterback, at least in terms of a prospect, is a position that I'll mostly just leave up to fate. I will value him at market, and then I'll wait to see who CJ Stroud and who Bryce Young is, and then just pay the extra when we actually have the information. Because I got lucky with Patrick Mahomes, got it wrong with Josh Allen, called it even, and
Hey, you win some, you lose some. You can't win them all, right?
I'm at net zero. That's good. I quit before I'm behind.
Hey, to win with Pat Mahomes, though, you take the big dub and you can walk away.
That's
from
the
the
thing.
L.
You got a big dub and the biggest L. Just net zero that out and be like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm going to leave this to Travis May and Sean Slavin, who actually seem to have some skill at evaluating quarterbacks or tape guys.
Yeah, I'm in a league with Travis, so I have to deal with his.
Oh yeah, good luck.
Yeah, exactly. It's a league we go from high school all the way to the NFL. So I can only imagine.
Oh, it's one of the what campus to Canton leagues.
It's called the Pinnacle of Devi. Shane Hallam started it, and Travis is in. There's a couple other guys, but yeah, it's wild. It seems as though Mike's having some technical difficulties, so I'm pretty sure that he wanted to talk about the get out. Guys who are trying to get out from if we can, because what we thought they were going to do to what we see that they're doing, the value isn't there for us. So let's run it down. You say quarterbacks aren't really your thing, so let's just put them to the side. Let's go to something.
Oh no! Once I have information on them in the NFL, we can do that. I actually have some interest. I saw his list, and he had Trevor Lawrence on it, if I remember right.
Yeah, his first three with. Yeah, but Trevor Lawrence, Watson, and Young. I threw on Love and Fields.
Love and Fields for sure, but I was out on them before the season started. Again, once I've seen them play in the NFL, I can get a better assessment of what they're going to do in the NFL. Again, not 100%, but I can start making, trying to hit over 50%. And Love, I felt waiting this long into his career, and especially based on his rookie performance or his rookie evaluation, weighing that in, I kind of didn't want in on it. And then to start the season where he was so touchdown dependent, I just got increasingly out. Fields, I thought there was some hope because he's such a good rusher, and in college he was fairly accurate.
Right.
And he finished in the top 12, which is a big thing for a young quarterback last year. But looking over at this offseason and talking about it, people that on the podcast that do have slightly more skill with quarterback evaluation, they pointed out how inefficient some of his performance was and how he was overly dependent on rushing. This is something a lot of people equated to Lamar Jackson, but the thing is, Lamar Jackson was accurate in college and accurate in the NFL. It's very different than just being a good rusher. And so I actually just about managed to get out of Fields before, in terms of my ranks, before the season started. And everything so far, as everyone knows, is kind of confirmation biased that. And so, I've been out on those two for a while. Trevor Lawrence is a little awkward. I thought that was an interesting name to put on there. I don't know what's going on in Jacksonville. That offense is struggling despite some really great performances from Travis Etienne and Evan Ingram, which is great to see. Kevin Ridley's got the routes, but isn't quite performing on it as we'd expect. To be honest, that's one of my big misses this season. I thought he would come back and be Calvin Ridley, and he really hasn't. Even though he's earned the volume, which is what you want, the performance hasn't been there. I don't know if that's a tape question, whether the chemistry isn't there or whether the role isn't quite meshing. I don't know, but it's definitely not there. Currently, according to my ranks, he's my second least favorite quarterback relative to his average rank on DLF. But I've got him ranked 10th overall, and there's this really interesting quarterback is such a good position right now for Dynasty. And I think, and looking at my ranks overall, what that means is I will trade back into Dak Prescott. If you will add to Dak Prescott to get Trevor Lawrence, I'm willing to do that. It's not like I don't like Trevor Lawrence or don't think he's good anymore. It's just that I think Dak Prescott's also pretty good. And if I can add value to my roster in Dynasty, I'll do that. That's fine. I'll pay those years to get extra value somewhere else because quarterbacks play for so long. I think Dak's fine. But there are very few quarterbacks I would do that for Trevor Lawrence because he's in this really, really nice tier. I expect him to be good to great for another 10 years, rough numbers. So it's not like I'm panic selling, but I think there are opportunities right now to trade back a little bit. And for most people's value and add to your roster somewhere else, whether it's first round pick or upgrade to wide receiver or get an extra running back or a tight end that your roster needs. Really depends on your team situation, what you might be interested in doing.
So,
and the choppiness, by the way, just for anyone who does watch this or is watching this and just who keeps fading in and out, it's probably me. I live in Kentucky. This is sometimes a problem. My internet is run by a hamster and a wheel. So
what kind of cheese? He's gonna chase the cheese. You got to get him that Gouda. Yeah,
I gotta get good cheese because he's struggling.
Yeah. So with Trevor Lawrence, if Mike is good, he'll just take over. But I'm just gonna keep it rolling for right now. With Trevor Lawrence, you mentioned Dak Prescott. Who's another quarterback that you would, if you had Trevor Lawrence, you wanted to get out of it? Who's the guy you would target to get in a package?
I actually had two names in the same tier. One's Dak Prescott, like I said. That makes more sense for a competitive team right now. Like if you're winning, especially after last week, Dak looks really good. Right. And if you can add value, so you're winning or you increase your points somewhere else, like you can add who's a running back that's only good for this year, depending on who they have on their roster. You can really push to win this year. I think don't underrate the chance to win in Dynasty. Like it's pretty rare. It's 1 in 12 at best. So use that extra value to try and win. But if you're not winning, you're a building team. The name that sticks out to me is Bryce Young, who's on your sell list. And he has sucked. But here's the thing. I think quarterbacks basically remain the same value in year 2. Like Bryce Young hasn't been good. But because of the number of aging and injured quarterbacks right now, we have an extra nerd bot.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on, guys. How's the audio sound? Is it bad?
It's all right. You're better than no sound.
All right, we're going, man. I'm going for my phone. I don't know what's happening, but we're going with it.
All right.
Where we at? What are we doing?
I was saying you could trade Trevor Lawrence. Sorry.
We were saying like I just dove into your list of QBs and what he would take for Trevor Lawrence, what he would trade for Trevor Lawrence, and what he would be looking to get back. And he had just mentioned Dak Prescott, and then he said Bryce Young. So this was getting interesting.
Yeah.
If you're on a building team, I think Bryce Young's value isn't going to increase. Like it sucked. Don't get me wrong. But I think his draft capital buys him long enough. He's going to have some good. Hang on. He's going to have some good games at some point. I think he's a talented player with some accuracy, and his introduction to the NFL has been a receiving core, which is just Adam Thielen in his last days, So I think he can have other good games. And just because there's so few good upside potential quarterbacks right now, I don't think he falls too much in value. I don't think you can. He'll be that much easier to trade for this offseason, which means you basically get to carry him into next season. When those good games come, there'll be a window where someone else is interested in him. So if you can trade from Trevor Lawrence, who's good and struggling this year, but still going to be great, we're pretty convinced, and get extra value, like Bryce Young and a first for Trevor Lawrence, that means you can trade Bryce Young, hopefully when he has some good games later if you need to, and you have this extra first to play with to take another moonshot in your rookie draft or do something else on your roster. And I think on a building team where you're mostly interested in reducing risk and increasing your value so you can make more moves to improve your team, that could be interesting. But it's a little hairy. Bryce Young, everyone could hate Bryce Young. You're not going to trade him easily until he has good games, put it that way. And so you're just betting that you've got at least, 17 more games in the NFL before the book is written. I think he gets next year before everyone writes him off. And so you've got all that time for him, hopefully, to get better receivers or find a better connection, have a stretch of 2, 3, 4 good games, and suddenly he increases in value or he's more tradable. And you made that move earlier and also added, whatever else you got in that trade to your roster. So a building team could really try to move forward in that direction. But that's about it. Again, Trevor Lawrence is great. Like he's struggling. I've moved him down in ranks a little bit, but it's mostly because Stroud has jumped him, and Tua Tagovailoa turns out like Matthew Stafford's not going to forever be concussed, which is great news because that was seriously concerning there for a minute. Serious injuries, but is actually back to being, as good as he is. So he stabilizes just above Lawrence just because his performance this year is more interesting to more teams that are competitive. So you've got more options to trade him to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm out, but I'm not big out, or however you described it. Like, there's very few directions I want to get rid of, quote unquote, Trevor Lawrence, but there are options. So that's why he measures a slight decrease in my ranks. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry guys, I realize I'm making your internet choppy, and every answer to every question has been like a full essay. So I'm gonna try and shrink it down. I swear.
No, this is good, man.
Just
you guys
ruining this great podcast in one appearance, and I've ruined it.
No, I think that was totally me. I don't know what's going on, but I love what I see from Trevor Lawrence though as an NFL quarterback. I just don't like the fantasy production that we're seeing. So it's like, do I want to sell him? Yeah. Will I ever get the value that I think I should get for him? Absolutely not. The Bryce Young trade is interesting to me. Here's another one I want to throw out. Do you think you can get Anthony Richardson straight up for Trevor Lawrence right now, given the injury? Or would you do that? Would you go?
Anthony Richardson was the guy I added to your list. Like I was kind of full out this offseason because I understood the argument, but where I played quarterbacks is a mystery. Like, and especially Richardson, he passed his college career. He passed fewer times than one top 10 rookie pick passes in a single season. I was like, we definitely don't know. Like, he could be great, especially because he's such a great rusher, and he could be terrible. Like, that's the range of outcomes. So I was like, I'll value him where he's valued, but I prefer Young. I prefer Stroud if I have to take a quarterback in a super flex draft, which I'm going to do early in a draft, just because it's such a wide range of outcomes. Now, Dynasty in general, it is good to shoot for the upside. So, like, he should have been 101 in Superflex leagues. But personally, with my process and where I like to take my own guesses, I was less likely to do that. I take Young, I take Stroud, and then I take Bijan Robinson, which essentially means I try to trade back in a rookie draft, actually. But just because that's a risk I know I can't take. I don't have any edge. I don't know, especially with a prospect like Richardson, I don't know if he's going to be good or good. The process says go for the upside, but there's other alternative in Dynasty, this value thing, which means you can trade back. Just say, I don't know. You go take that guess. And if it hits, it's the best hit in Dynasty, especially Superflex. It's Josh Allen. No single greater advantage to a fantasy team than drafting Josh Allen in his rookie year, or Richardson if he pays off. But that's just, I'm going to try and take risks where I think I can get it right over 50%, like I said. And I don't think that's one for me. Like, he could be great. And those first few games that he's played, again, it was all rushing. But his passing with like over 60% completions, like maybe. I just have no idea. He passed so little in college. Like, even Travis May, who we mentioned earlier, he was like, we don't know if he's good. Because his passing was so limited and bad from what we saw. I think Travis's line was, if he's good, it sets NFL analytics back 20 years. I think that was his line. I was like, okay, so Travis is out. I should probably be out.
I would rather have Kyler Murray after the injury than Anthony Richardson.
Oh, absolutely. I would too. Yeah, I would too. No doubt about that. I think, the only concern I had with Kyler was him being immobile coming back and probably having that aspect of his game, be on hold for a little while. And he was going to struggle with that. But like that, no signs of that on his first game back. He was ready to go. He had that game-winning drive where he ran 35 yards or whatever that set him up in the field goal range, and that's all I needed to see. Like, I'm full in on Kyler all day.
My issue with Anthony Richardson and Fields is like quarterbacks. I know that they get the extra for being mobile, but when the legs is option 1 and the arm is option 2, I'm out because I just don't feel you can survive like that. I mean, you can have a year or 3/4 of a year, but there's no longevity in that. Lamar Jackson isn't that. Lamar Jackson can throw the ball, and he's accurate. You know what I mean?
That's what I was going to say. I think it depends. It's a case like, I don't think rushing leads to more injuries. I don't think I don't think that's true. But I do think you have to be good at passing. That's the thing. That was my problem with Richardson. I don't think it gives enough credit to Lamar Jackson to say Anthony Richardson has that upside just value that. Because so many great I mean, again, if you get in the NFL, you're like in the top 1% of humanity at this game. Like even Ted Ginn, it's such a small elite group of football players because it all gets whittled down from these schools to these schools. Right. And there's one league. There's one significant league. And to thread that needle to be someone who is more of a rusher and a passer in the NFL, like so few have done it. Like Cam Newton gets slack all the time for his passing ability, but how many great rushers, like Geno Smith has proven to be capable in the NFL. He was a great rusher before the Cam Newton era, right? He's good. He's top 1% in humanity, but Cam Newton was better and Lamar Jackson is better. And it's just, once you recognize how rare you have to be just to be a good quarterback, let alone a good quarterback with this specific skill set, I think if you can recognize the credit that they are due, you can understand the risk it feels to like the upside of an Anthony Richardson or who else was it this year? No, Will Levis was the one I was thinking of, but that wasn't a rushing argument. Last year it was Malik Willis, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And it's same like, team. Yeah, it would be great, but it's so hard to be that. Not just like hard on a human level, but like an elite athlete level. Anyway, sorry, I've got a whole it circles in my head where I mostly don't know with quarterbacks. A few things that I can kind of latch onto to make a decision really stick out to me, and that's one that stuck out to me. Like just value Kyler Murray, value Lamar Jackson. They are so incredible. Like Tom Brady is obviously phenomenon of all phenomenons, but anyone who can do that in the NFL, and whether they're just passing or rushing quarterbacks. Like they're such elite humans, they're unicorns, really among a group of unicorns.
That's what I was just going to say. Cam Newton is a unicorn, but this is a never-ending story. You're not going to find, that's the thing at the end of the thing. Like everybody's trying to make, like they're trying to find the next Cam Newton. Just trying to find the next guy. Don't try to find, Cam Newton is the outlier. Right? They tried to make Josh Allen to be the Cam Newton. And look what's happened to Josh Allen now. It's just kind of.
I'd say that's the thing though. Like Josh Allen's a success story. I mean, not just in fantasy either. Like the Bills have been he's revolutionized. It used to be the Jets, the Bills were one of those bottom two teams perpetually. The Cleveland Browns, Jets, and Bills. And Josh Allen has helped transform them into like one of the most powerful offenses in the NFL the last 3 years.
But they can't win the big
like
game.
You said, there's still a limitation there because his accuracy always struggled a little bit. And Stephon Diggs can only make up for it so much over so long. Because I really do think Diggs, I think he can make people a little more accurate than they actually are. He's just that good. But still, Josh Allen is an incredible success story. And look at the needle he had to thread. It's just keeping an eye on how much of a 1% outcome that is, how rare it is. Just means, shoot for it because that upside is amazing, but just be aware of how unlikely it is, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Even though we're rooting for it, it's amazing.
Now that we moved it on to Josh Allen a little bit here. So we know he's a success story by and large, of course. Like he exceeded everyone's expectations and his development
last week sucked, but he'll
incredible.
have more good weeks. Yeah.
But do you think has he regressed in your mind? Like has he taken a step back in the last 2 years as far as what he can do in a game and how much you trust him on the line most of the time, or is that just overreaction as a whole?
I think that's more a question because again, I have barely put my foot into the evaluation ring. I don't watch the tape. I don't know what these players are all impressive to me. Is honestly my opinion on their ability. What I would say is, isn't it relative to the year? Like quarterback scoring at the elite level, has Patrick Mahomes regressed, even though he's always been phenomenal and accurate, and it's not just an accuracy problem with Mahomes. Quarterback scoring in general is a little down. This might be defensive adjustments to the passing game a little bit, or these offenses which have been dominant in the last 3 years, enough defenses have made enough good changes to maybe null some of that advantage that they've had. But that's, again, probably more of a beautiful mind spacebar guy kind of a question because I'm just looking at the production. I'm like, it looks pretty good. Points over 20 points this number of weeks seems pretty good. But you're right, it is significantly down this year, but that's kind of across the board. The top 5, the top 12 are all scoring a little less than they did last year or the year before. And the difference between them and the second tier is a little smaller as well.
He leads the league in turnovers. So, and he was top 3 in turnovers last year. My thing I've noticed in 2 seasons, he doesn't take many snaps on the center. A lot of his snaps are in the gun, and they let him go free willy-nilly style. But when they go on the center, they seem to be more productive with less turnover ratio. Now, who does that fall? Is it on Josh Allen? Does he get too much freedom behind, at the line of scrimmage? Or does that fall on OCs who just saying, I'm indecisive of what I want to play. I'll let that guy be the fall guy and let him. Here's 2 plays, Josh. You pick which one you want to go. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like on the run, which was his, a positive for him. I feel in the last 2 years it's kind of been more of a negative. I feel he's getting more turnover plays and more like turnover worthy plays when he's been on the run.
Yeah, I agree that we're talking about in the shotgun most of his mistakes, and it's his decision making. So it makes me believe. So one, I think that he is getting multiple plays at the same time, and he's the decider, because ultimately you can see him working a little harder mentally than he should be at the quarterback position in those circumstances. Like he is thinking too hard, and I think that is making him make those decisions that he shouldn't have to make. Like he is probably going through multiple plays in his mind and then having to go through his reads at the same time, which is like not great when you're talking about a 2-minute offense or whatever it is that you're going through. You shouldn't have that many thoughts going through your minds, like on that snap right there. That shouldn't be like, hey, I could go multiple different directions. But let's segue that to looking confused and looking disoriented to Deshaun Watson. If we didn't talk about them, I don't know if we talked about Deshaun Watson,
we didn't.
right? Because I missed half the show already. So Deshaun Watson, yeah, he man, I think a lot of people are rooting for him to not do well. Like he is not doing too well, but I think we see him flash a little bit. We see him come in last game and kind of look like the old Deshaun Watson a little bit. Do we feel good about him in Dynasty? Like, do we think that he's ever gonna be the Deshaun Watson that we all hoped he would be after 2 years off of football?
Well,
I don't put him. Well, the upside you're talking about is you've got Josh Allen, despite the fact everything we just said, Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, which production-wise are just a different class for us. And I think it's really interesting that Jalen Hurts, I mean, he's there, but we don't talk about him in the same vein as Allen and Mahomes in Dynasty. But like, he's got 3 extra years on him, so like he should be Dynasty quarterback 1, maybe. But anyway, that's a separate conversation.
Yes.
That's the level of production like that Watson flashed earlier in his rookie season. From a fantasy point of view, I'm not putting him back up in there. I think he's in this middle tier where, again, we're seeing some of the potential, but we see that with Lawrence. We see that with Burrow. I would have Herbert over him. And then you also don't have the baggage and the Cleveland reputation, frankly, of being cursed. So, no, for me, I'm not. Like, last week was the most positive, and he did early in his career have that, literally that top 5, top 3 upside. I'm not going to go back in on betting he can get back there, especially with the baggage that he carries, because people's distaste or not distaste for rostering players, there's also a real world scenario, which obviously the Browns aren't concerned, so far not concerned about. But if they don't win, aren't they already looking for other options? Because the NFL seems to be a what have you done for me lately league. So despite the contract that he's got, you could see like next year him being still having the job with this mega contract, but there's rumors and there's a great quarterback class coming, and maybe they make a trade and suddenly Watson's like injured again, and there's many more paths to him suddenly being out of that, even that middle class, and into that top tier. Sorry, if you know what I mean. For me, I know that's very holistic, but that's kind of the way I think about quarterback.
No, I'm hand in hand with you right now, so I feel the same way. Nino, what do you think about Watson? Like, where do you think that? Say, give it a 3-year window. Like, is Watson
$263 million reasons why he will be there for the next 3 years. They guaranteed all the money. They can't take the hit. Puts the franchise back way too far.
That's never stopped the Browns before. Also, like, I kind of feel with the cap,
$260 million is a lot more than Browns have ever invested in somebody guaranteed before.
Yeah, that's true. And also I like to see the guaranteed contracts. I just, just generically, I always try and remember this is play money to the owners. Like, to me, that's more money I will literally ever see in 10 of my lifetimes. To the guy who owns the Browns, it's what he's spending on his hobby. Like, this is his hobby. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
I get it.
And don't get me wrong, it's a really strong point.
If you go back and look, 2 quarterbacks, him and Baker, you're looking at $400 million of guaranteed money that they just missed out. Right?
Just
but
away, yeah.
Watson, it's not about rookie year. It's not about second year. It's not about the massage parlor. It's not about all the negativity. It's not even about the 2 years off. It's about the year before he got bopped. He was terrible. The year before all of this went down, he was absolute dog shit compared to what his 3 seasons before that were. You saw the decline. Everybody on that offense wanted out, right? Everybody's out. If he was the dude and he was going to be a top 5 QB in the league, everybody would be buying in. They weren't. They wanted out. You saw it. You could see the downfield ducks. You could see him, as you want to say about Josh Allen, too much in the headpiece, thinking too much about what he's going to do. And now you factor in a major shoulder injury, right? And what's the other injury now? Is it ankle or a hamstring or something? Yeah, he had 2 injuries. Shoulder injury and not being good, and then you take 2 years off. It was just bad to go from the start. And Browns made a bet they have to sleep in for 3 years. It's going to be really stinky and ugly.
Nobody wants a stinky
bet. It's
bed.
to have a long memory. That's a good point. I completely forgotten about that last year. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Deshaun Watson still has an arm to me. Like, he still has velocity on his ball. Like, he's never going to be that dual threat QB that we did see. He's never going to have, prime Nuke and Will Fuller to throw those balls to. Man, I don't know. He's going to be there. You're right. He's going to be there. It'd take I don't know. It would be like a very Browns thing for him not to be there, though. So I can't say he's got to be there because who knows what they're going to do.
You said Nuke. You said Nuke, right? And who was the other guy that you said that was with them?
Will Fuller,
which only performs with Watson.
Fuller there for a minute.
If Watson's not in the quarterback, Will Fuller is non-existent. So, right? But look, you had Nuke. He's got weapons, bro. He's got more. He's got David Njoku, and he's got Cooper. These are weapons. And he's struggling to get these guys weapons. He's getting the ball. He's struggling to get these weapons the ball. That I don't know, man. He ain't kicking the rust.
I will say Cooper came back to life with the return of Watson. I would say that. There's a clear difference between him and the replacement, at least. For me,
who was throwing the ball before?
Yeah, exactly. For me, it becomes down to an easier equation because I'm just playing Dynasty. You're talking about the NFL. And that seems way more complicated. From a dynasty perspective, it's just what is the trade, right? What does my team look like? Unless I'm winning and Deshaun Watson is barely producing average points right now. So even on a winning team, he's not, hopefully he can keep up last week and he's fine. But there are so many options for if you're looking for a 1-year fine guy to go win, I can get a plus on Purdy or a plus on one of these this year guys, Stafford. Then you even got a history of him actually being good. He's probably going to play in week 11. From a dynasty perspective, if I can get that plus and those points this year, then on a competitive team, I would do that because I have other years to think about and you're getting out from all these questions. And on a building team, do you think I'm going to ride Watson into the offseason, hoping he's more tradable at some point? Like, it kind of makes sense to me to try to trade him to someone at the top 5 in my league that might have just lost Stafford or is maybe a little more uncertain about Sam Howell or someone else in their quarterback 2 spot in the Superflex league. So there's not many dynasty situations I think I'm just holding on to Deshaun Watson. I'm mostly shopping him out. And that's not predicting the future or condemning or praising his career. It's just, I think from a dynasty perspective, it's what does your team look like? What is the best move? I think in most dynasty situations, because The only way those two moves don't work out is if he bounces back to being Deshaun Watson in that great season, right?
Yeah.
Which is like it'd be great. From a fantasy perspective, to have him back there because more players scoring more points is good for us in general. But it seems like the rarest outcome. So I think from a dynasty perspective, I'm like, I think I can do more for my team by moving him, no matter what my team looks like.
In a dynasty aspect, give me Sam Howell with the uncertainty of next year. Even though I'm trying to win right now in dynasty, or I'm trying to go with the longevity,
Especially
give me Sammy Howell.
Yeah, I would probably go that route too. And then I think it's good to open up conversation about Sam Howell because Sam Howell was what, 5th round pick. Did we feel good? I loved Howell coming out.
I did too.
His DC kind of killed it for me. I'll be honest. Like I really was almost out because I said I just trust the NFL a little too much sometimes when it comes to draft capital, and I got to stop doing that altogether. I mean, they're right most of the time, but it is the usage and everything really kind of lines up usually with that value plummeting. But do we like Sam Howell next year? Because I think I do. I think he's done enough to lock that job up for at least 2 years.
With Bill Belichick?
With Bill Belichick. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I heard today that they said he's already confirmed on a different team.
And it's GM and head coach.
As GM head coach, he's already on a different team verbally. That's what is there truth behind that? I don't know, but
I don't know either. But it's going to be spicy. But yeah, I like Sam Howell. I think Sam Howell has the tools. We're seeing him getting it done. He's not a one-trick pony, but he's literally distributing the ball to 3 receivers and Logan Thomas. Like Logan Thomas has been drank the fountain youth water. He's back, right? 2 years of injury. Kind of didn't know if he was going to be all right. He's been relevant this year. Thank you to Sammy Howell. Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson have all been productive this year, and Scary Terry's getting it done. And he's got 2 running backs in the backfield who we don't know who's going to be, but they both catch the ball from Sammy Howell. So give me Sammy Howell any day of the week and twice on Sunday in fantasy over Deshaun Watson. But I got to bounce on you, Mikey.
I was going to say, yeah.
On that note, I'll see you later, man. Have fun. Thank you.
Later.
Thank you for holding the pod down. I appreciate it.
I got you.
All right,
nice to see you, man.
Love you. Good. Pleasure meeting you, buddy. We'll have to get through it again.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I hope so. Oh, he's gone.
He's gone. If I end up falling out, if my internet just dies again, it's going to be.
I'll just hold it. Don't worry about it. I'm taking over this thing. Don't worry about it.
I know you held it. We got a new host tomorrow. It's going to be you and only you. It's just a one-man show now. Yeah. So that's good quarterback talk.
I think Sam Howell's interesting, and to something that you said earlier, if I know I'm good at something, or it's like, especially with quarterbacks, I try and find someone who is and just follow what they say. And Sam Howell is one of the people that Zach Reed and also Travis May, who I've mentioned like 4 times now, both said shouldn't have been drafted that low, incredibly accurate. He's really interesting this year. So I could take credit for that, but no, I just moved him up on my ranks purely because Travis and Zach said do that. And yeah, I think it's really paid off. And I think, what is it? There's a strong NFL building mechanic, which is the quarterback salary is such a significant thing that if you can get one locked in at a 5th round salary, and they've got him for 3 years now, like they should really try and use this window, even if nothing else comes together. That's such a added value to their roster. I think they'd be crazy at least not to expect him to be their guy next year, although there's a little less certainty with their with his sack ratio, I believe, and also just his draft capital means they could move on. But where it creates that cap window and where they can build around this cheaper than average quarterback who's definitely, as Nino definitely pointed out well, is doing more than enough to compete with the average in the NFL at least. I think they'd be crazy not to exploit it for at least another year. So, yeah, I think Sam Howell's doing great.
I agree with that point. That's an excellent point that, team building is important. And are you going to spend a 1st round draft pick on somebody that you're going to have to throw a whole lot of money at? Or are you going to take a guy and keep him that probably is going to give you more production than that 1st round rookie quarterback? I would say there's a very good chance that Howell will outproduce any rookie quarterback outside of the top 2 next year. without a doubt. So I mean, they're not going to look at that pick anyway. So I think Howell's got a lot more job security than a lot of people think out there.
It's a really interesting team from that perspective because, I mean, it's got two decent wide. I think Terry's a little above decent, and its running backs. I mean, the replaceability of running backs has been an ongoing, let's call it a conversation in fantasy for a while. But they've got two decent ones, at least two decent wide receivers, this decent quarterback that costs them no money. Feels like a window where they could really, if they did well in the draft or well through contracts and well through trades, they could really do something interesting. But it's also Washington, so maybe they won't. They could do something really interesting.
Yeah, these quarterback situations are always usually talked about with poverty franchises as a whole, because we're talking Washington, we're talking the Browns, and it's like, man, it's a revolving door, and you think they have talent, and then all of a sudden it just falls apart. Like it's like they have their guy, and then the system or whatever it is, like the coaching staff, I don't know what happens, but they just take an asset and they just destroy it. They rip it up and they throw it away, and then it just floats in the wind until it lands somewhere else, and then they look good.
There has been something of a bad management over there in Washington for a while, but yeah, there's also been some bad luck. Like Robert Griffin was phenomenal, and those injuries, like you really can't, unfortunately, help injuries sometimes. And they had Kirk Cousins, but in that whole debacle between who's the quarterback, he ends up leaving. And like it just feels so mistimed and mismanaged and bad luck. And sometimes it'd be like that, I guess. But hopefully they're entering another window where if they don't get terrible management or terrible luck, I mean, Sam Howell plus those weapons plus not having that freedom to add to the offensive line or the defensive line or end up using their first round pick on an elite skill position that isn't quarterback could potentially really do a lot for them. But also, that's NFL stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. So talking trades, right? Would you buy Sam Howell right now in Dynasty? Would you go and buy him if you're going for it? You need a quarterback?
Yeah. I have him valued pretty well in my ranks. I think the question for me, especially that, like, there's relatively few quarterbacks. I'm mostly looking for windows on when I'd say go and buy. Like Kyler Murray, all the way up until last week, was my biggest buy in Superflex Dynasty. Was the line this offseason. But now, like, he had a good game, so he's back to just being valued there. So probably not anymore. And Sam Howell might be in a window for that. But I don't see... The reason Kyler Murray was there is because he has that rarity of those top 5 outcomes. Like, there's 5 quarterbacks. Like, if they enter a window, I go after them. It's, like we said, Hurts. It's Mahomes. It's Allen. I like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and Justin Herbert. And if one of those 6 enters a window where people are less certain on them, I'm more all in on going for them. Because I think at that level of quarterback, until this year, that extra point differential has really mattered for fantasy football. Sam Howell is interesting from a value perspective, because like everything we just said. But I don't ever see him producing like that in fantasy. And so the enthusiasm to go get him is all about, well, what's the trade? Am I trading Stafford to Howell? Cool. In Dynasty, that makes sense. Am I trading Watson for Howell plus? So I get something extra? Yeah, sure. But mostly when I say I'm going and buying, it's a player who I think's in a window that I like more, and I will be proven right, like the Kyler Murray window in the future. So outside of that, everyone's tradable, and I think Sam Howell's interesting, but he's not on my like strong target list or anything like that. Actually, who is?
Yeah, share that.
Stroud. I'd rather
Stroud,
pay
definitely.
more for Stroud. Yeah.
So what I did recently in a league is I traded Stroud to get Mahomes. So it was like Stroud and Hawkinson it was essentially Stroud and Hawk for Mahomes and Ingram at that point in time.
Makes sense.
What else was there? No, there's a 24-second in there as well. So it was like Stroud and a 24-second for Hawkinson and Ingram. And what do you think? I mean, are you taking Mahomes there? Or are you so high on Stroud that he's like in that tier already? Is he like in that?
He's not in that tier, but he's in the one just below it. In that, I think that's a really solid trade. You're trying to win this year. The Mahomes makes sense because he just adds that little extra on top, and you're trying to get that plus. And he's also just in that higher tier. He's easier to trade to more teams at that level of value. Like, even though Stroud should be pretty close, I don't think he's there for every team in every league. So Mahomes has more value broadly in that generic sense we were talking about before we started. For most leagues, it makes sense to value Mahomes there. But if you're building, like, it makes a lot of sense to trade Mahomes into Stroud plus because you can do more with your roster to move forward that way. So I think that's just a really solid trade. I think,
Yeah, I think I see that a lot. I see Mahomes for Stroud. So one way or the other, if you're slow building, if you're doing a rebuild and you want to move off of Mahomes at this point in time, because he's like 28, I think. Like, we're not there yet where Mahomes is going to slide or anything like that. But you do have to think about that as a dynasty asset. That like these quarterbacks do slide around age 29, 30. I don't think Mahomes is going to slide anywhere, but you're talking about like a Dak slide, like he's going to drop maybe to like the end of the first or the early second or something, that's not too far. And it's not too hard to imagine Stroud moving up to be right behind the big three. So he could be the fourth startup pick quarterback in this offseason, could be right behind Josh Allen or maybe even right in front of Josh Allen at this point in time. Who knows?
Outside of those Sam Howell or even Purdy's been impressive this year as well. Those kind of segues where you're expecting another year and you're just trying to sneakily add more value to do something else with your roster. I don't think there's a clear full-on buy like it was Kyler Murray, unless the person in your league hasn't caught up with Murray's value or Stroud's value. I think those are the two that I would still be sending offers on, just in case, Stroud, the range of outcomes is still wider than Mahomes. He could still not be everything we've seen so far. I'm pretty convinced. But someone in your league might still feel it's a little more risky. Or Murray, for that matter. It's just one game, and he did miss that touchdown. So who knows? And, maybe he plays Call of Duty. You can always get those leagues where someone in your league that believes that kind of stuff. Outside of that, there's no clear buy. Outside of making smart moves like you did between Stroud and Mahomes to try and move your team in the right direction. I don't think there's any clear mega buy, as it were. Whereas on the other side, like where you started, I think there are some clearer sells. Love, Fields. I think Lawrence is interesting, although you definitely don't want to panic trade him. I actually think the lowest value, my rank versus consensus right now, is Mahomes. And it's because he's perpetually ranked as a 1 because he's Patrick freaking Mahomes. But Allen and Hurts to me in the exact same tier, and I could flip him 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. I'll rank him any which way. And so if you're building and you have Mahomes, I think depending on what the Hurts and the Allen owner are doing right now, you could find a trade there. And it's just because I have him ranked 2. and he's normally ranked potentially 1 across the board.
You could probably, at this point in time, just from name value alone, and people still have a stigma on running quarterbacks. Like, you probably get Hurts in a second in some leagues for Mahomes. Like, you probably move, just because people see Mahomes as having more stability, even though Hurts has showed us that that's not an issue. But,
there's no reason to. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead, man. I was done anyway.
No,
go ahead. Go for it.
I was just going to make fully clear here, just because I don't want to be that in my mentions. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm saying if your team stinks and what you've got is Patrick Mahomes, here's a clear path for you staying in the exact same elite tier at quarterback and adding a little something. That's the right direction. That's the situation, not I have Patrick Mahomes, you're just good as long as your rest of your roster is pretty solid. Just keep Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. But that's why he comes up as my biggest sell, I guess you could call this list, just because he is so consensus 1. And just because I occasionally flip in Hurts, flip in Allen, because honestly, you can mix and match. That just means there's a potential opportunity for teams in that very specific situation.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I
don't want someone to trade Patrick Mahomes for a second next week and then be like, well, you told me to. Like, no.
Oh, well, no. A second it hurts in a second, but it's no asset should be untradeable on your team at that point in time. But it's got to
very
make
difficult
sense.
to move.
Yeah, it's true.
With that situation.
While we wrap up, I'm gonna throw some names at wide receiver. You tell me if you want to hold them or just throw them in the trash. Like you can just say hold and trash. Jameson Williams.
Trash.
Marvin Mims.
Hold. Just because you're not getting anything, you may as well see how it works out.
Yeah. I'm with you on both of those so far. Treylon Burks.
That one hurts, but trash by now, yeah.
I know that hurts me the most.
I'd love to go on a rant about that one, but it's just percentage-wise, going this deep into your career, doing this little. I mean, Corey Davis is kind of the arc we're looking at right now. It's not bad, but the upside is.
Yeah, you're going to look at maybe a couple boom games here and there, but he's going to be in and out. And I think, I don't want to label any player as injury prone, but I think at this point in time, Treylon Burks probably is going to be a guy that misses like a quarter of the season at best every year.
There is a thing that is injury prone, but I think it's overly used. I think the point is the NFL believes in it. That's kind of my get out of jail free card. The NFL is going to buy in to him not being good at some point, even though he's my wide receiver one that year. Like I was fully in. It's a complete miss by me in my rookie ranks. I'm not trying to tank the guy who's phenomenal in college as far as I can see, but sorry. Trash.
Yeah, I was I had him as my wide receiver 2 of that league, and I still own too many shares of him. So let's go Christian Watson.
Oh, trash. I was out last year.
Yeah, okay. We're simpatico, my friend.
Too many touchdowns, man. Too many touchdowns, and you lose Aaron Rodgers out.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't see him ever touching value like he had last year, right? Like I personally think that he was extremely overvalued to start, and I think this is where he is. He is make a comp, like we're talking a Gabe Davis range for me, like in that.
Yeah, incredible NFL player, very competent. Offenses should love to have him. Packers should be happy to have him. I'm not trying to trash the player, but fantasy-wise, the range of outcomes seem, like you said, Gabe Davis, sure. Like, incredible weekly upside, not incredible season-long upside was where I kind of felt.
Let's do one more. He's getting a lot of buzz right now. George Pickens.
Ooh, he's interesting if his value ever falls. That's the thing. He's such a highlight reel guy because he can make these amazing plays that it feels like there's never a moment to trade for him, if you know what I mean. Because he's always kind of like, no, I saw that catch. And so there's never a window to get him.
Yeah.
So I guess he's just a hold. I did a couple weeks ago on my weekly series for DLF. I pointed out he was getting all these routes and not producing on them, but it's Kenny Pickett. Like, that's the reason. And so I was like, there might be a window coming up. And then the next week he went off for 20 points with a highlight reel catch. I was like, forget it.
Yeah, man. Forget it. I know. He feels like a decent buy because Kenny Pickett's probably not going to be there forever. I don't know if this is his trial run ends anytime soon, but they might not have somebody to replace him immediately. But
it depends
he's so
on
young,
the
man.
trade, but
yeah,
exactly. Same page. Unfortunately, I would love
so
to disagree.
You gotta, man. He's not a weekly start by any means, but man, he's the guy that like goes off on your bench and then he does nothing in your lineup most of the time. So he's like, what do you do with that? It's tough. But hey, man, I greatly appreciate you joining us tonight. I'm sorry that I was having some technical difficulties, but it sounds like you manned the show by yourself pretty much. So I appreciate you.
No, I think Nino did most of the heavy lifting there, and I just babbled on as I do. I'm sorry to come on your podcast and break it so badly, man. My bad. I meant to do a good job. I try to do better next time if I ever get the chance, because I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and I appreciate the chance to come on.
Yeah, I'd love to chop it up with you again and hopefully have some good internet to do that. But if you have anything that's coming up, any content, or if you're making any appearances anywhere that you want to let all the listeners know, that, just drop it, or anything.
Not really. I do my regular stuff. I write a weekly column for dynastyleaguefootball.com. A column? Yeah, I guess you can call it a column. It's a series. I do 2 different series, one for the off season, one for the in season. I make YouTube videos. You can I'll tell you what, you can find me on Twitter at PA All my data is pinned. It's free. And anything I do, I post right there. But honestly, Twitter, I guess it's not called Twitter anymore, but it's free. And I just like talking about fantasy football. So you can find me there. If you're interested in anything I'm doing, I usually post it there anyway. So just at PA Howdy. And I love to talk fantasy football. All conversations welcome.
Yeah, he's a great follow, man, and he's got all his content there. And I thought forever his name was Pa Howdy, like Pa, P-A, but it's P-A Howdy.
That'll do.
So Pa Howdy.
It's my initials, but Pa Howdy, I've been called that before. It makes sense. I never thought about it until someone said it, but you're right. That's what it looks like.
I didn't say it when we introed you. But, so next week we're doing a Thanksgiving special. We have, I want to say, Du Bois, so Kevin Coleman, and then who else is on the show? Troy King. So Kevin Coleman and Troy King are joining us next week.
Oh, awesome.
So good little show. And like I said, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate everybody listening, and we'll check you next week.
Yeah, the revolution, y'all. Yep, the revolution.
The revolution, y'all, will not be televised.
Yeah, you gotta wake up, open your eyes,
make a change in your life,
and find a new way of living.
It's time to start living for the children.
Everybody look into my life. Tell me what you see. The perseverance of a young man sitting is so free. LA Mac, be the champ, but still fighting the struggle. They couldn't shut my mouth with a muzzle. I'm hard to figure like a puzzle. My name ought to be Jigsaw, rough around the edges. I've been